What if I told you she never really left? Funny how a single truth can shatter the story you've been telling yourself. You think she's gone, happy in someone else's arms while you're left in the dark. But ask yourself this: who truly holds the power? The man who obsesses or the man who walks away untouched? Right now you feel betrayed, like she tore something out of you. But here's the truth: you never lost her, because she was never yours. She was only the mirror of your attachment. And here's the twist: the moment you stop caring is the moment her regret begins, because pain is an illusion, born the moment you crowned her as the prize. The real prize is the man you become when you stop chasing, stop needing, and start living untouchable. This was never about her. This was always about you. And when this ends, you won't just move on. You'll become the man she can never forget. Before we continue, take control. Like this video, subscribe to Stoic Station, and turn on notifications. Start this journey now. 1. The illusion of loss. It stings in a way no words can soften, doesn't it? Watching her choose someone else and feeling that sharp, sinking belief that maybe you just weren't enough. Your mind builds stories around that moment. Stories of failure, defeat, inadequacy, because pain loves to disguise itself as truth. But here's the part most men don't see until the storm inside finally settles. Her choosing him was never proof of your failure. It was proof of her certainty, and certainty in a woman's mind is the quiet death of curiosity. She didn't leave because he was better. She didn't walk away because you lacked something he had. She left because she believed she already understood you completely. She thought she had mapped out every corner of your spirit, every thought you would think, every move you would make. The moment she believed she knew everything about you was the moment she stopped looking deeper. Certainty kills curiosity, and without curiosity, a woman stops exploring you, stops learning you, stops valuing you. And here is the painful but liberating truth: she didn't walk away from the man you truly are. She walked away from the version of you she assumed would never evolve, the version she believed would stay predictable, familiar, unchanging. But a man is never fixed. A man is always in motion, either rising or sinking, and she simply failed to see the direction your life was capable of taking. Loss only becomes real if you stay the same man she decided to outgrow. But if you evolve, quietly, consistently, relentlessly, then what you thought you lost becomes nothing more than a moment of redirection. She may have chosen someone else, but that choice does not define your future unless you let it. The illusion of loss fades the moment you start becoming the man she never imagined you could become. And that's where the real story begins, because the next truth will show you why emotional detachment rewrites everything she once believed about you. 2. Emotional detachment. The real wound isn't that she chose him, it's the quiet truth you don't want to admit. She still occupies far more space in your mind than she ever earned. That's where the battle is happening, not between you and another man, but between you and the thoughts that keep giving her ownership of your peace. You replay her choice over and over, handing her a power she isn't even aware she holds. And every late-night moment when you check her profile, every scroll through her world searching for clues, becomes a silent surrender, not to her, but to the version of yourself that cannot let go. She doesn't have to do anything. She doesn't need to call, text, or prove a point. Your emotions are already doing the work for her, writing a story where you are the one waiting, hoping, wondering. And the more you react, the deeper you fall into the narrative she created when she walked away, not the one you are meant to write for yourself. That is the trap men fall into, believing emotional chaos is unavoidable, when in reality, it is simply untrained. Stoicism doesn't ask you to erase emotion or pretend the pain isn't real. It teaches you to master the art of not letting those emotions use you as their vessel. It teaches you that peace is a discipline, not an accident. When you choose detachment, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect, something powerful begins to shift. You stop living in response to her choices and start living according to your own principles. And in that moment, the power returns to where it always belonged, within you. Hold on to this truth, because the next insight reveals why indifference, real, grounded indifference, changes the entire dynamic in ways she never sees coming. Third, attraction through indifference. Here's the twist she never expects. The less you care, the more she feels it. A woman rarely worries about losing a man she believes will never leave her orbit. And that's the problem. She assumes you'll always be there as her emotional backup, a constant source of validation she can return to whenever the world grows quiet. That certainty is the very reason she doesn't notice your absence yet. She believes your attention is guaranteed, your presence predictable, your devotion permanent. But everything changes the moment your energy shifts away, quietly, without announcement, without anger. It's not a grand gesture or a dramatic exit. It's the slow, steady withdrawal of a man who finally chooses himself. And when that shift happens, her mind loses the anchor it once relied on. The emotional safety net she took for granted suddenly disappears. And nothing unsettles a woman more than realizing she no longer influences a man she once controlled emotionally. It disrupts her sense of power, her expectations, her certainty about who you are and who you will always be. This is where most men misunderstand the concept. Indifference isn't a tactic, a trick, or a game. True indifference is what rises naturally when you finally respect yourself enough to stop chasing someone who stopped choosing you. It's the quiet power of a man who no longer needs to be seen, validated, or acknowledged to know his worth. And when that happens, something shifts, not in you, but in her. Your silence becomes louder than your devotion ever was. Your distance becomes more meaningful than your closeness. And your lack of reaction becomes the very thing she can't ignore. When you stop orbiting her world, she begins to feel the gravity of yours. And that's where the dynamic flips completely, because the next truth reveals why absence, full, complete, unapologetic absence, creates an impact she never saw coming. 4. The power of absence. Presence makes you familiar, but absence makes you unforgettable. That's the paradox most men never understand, because disappearing feels too risky, too final, too much like surrender. They fear that stepping back erases them, that silence will cause her to forget, that distance means defeat. But what they don't see is that absence forces the mind to confront the empty space it cannot fill. When you're no longer accessible, no longer predictable, no longer lingering in the background, you create a vacuum her thoughts cannot ignore. She once believed she could come back any time. She believed you would always be where she left you, waiting, hoping, available. But that illusion collapses the moment she realizes she no longer knows where you stand. The messages she expected never arrive. The validation she counted on disappears. The quiet she once found comforting now feels unsettling, and uncertainty begins to take root. And uncertainty is the birthplace of regret. It's the crack in her confidence that grows each time she wonders why your absence feels heavier than your presence ever did. This is why silence matters, not as punishment, not as manipulation, but as a declaration of self-respect. Let silence speak for you. Let distance express what words never could. That you are a man who knows when to walk away. A man who refuses to remain where he is no longer valued. Because when a man walks away fully, with calm certainty and no attempt to be seen, he becomes far harder to replace than the man who begs to stay. And here's where the shift deepens. The more she feels the weight of your absence, the more she questions the choices she once made with confidence. Which leads to the next truth. Why mastering emotional control turns that uncertainty into something she can no longer ignore. 5. Mastering emotional control. The strongest men aren't the ones who feel nothing. They're the ones who aren't ruled by anything. Heartbreak tempts you to collapse, to prove your pain, to chase the clarity you think will finally set you free. But every emotional outburst, every message written from desperation, every moment you let your feelings spill out confirms the story she already told herself when she walked away. He needed me more than I needed him. And the moment she believes that, the balance shifts entirely in her favor. Reacting gives her validation she didn't earn. It tells her she still holds the reins, that your stability depends on her attention, and that her absence has the power to break you. And nothing kills respect faster than a man who loses himself for someone who already let him go. A man who crumbles becomes predictable. A man who begs becomes forgettable. A man who spirals becomes replaceable. But here's the quiet truth only a few men ever understand. Power is not regained through reaction, it's regained through restraint. Stand still, let the storm pass around you. You don't have to fight it, explain it, or control it. You only have to refuse to be swept away by it. Because a man who remains calm in the middle of emotional chaos is a man who becomes unforgettable. He is rare, he is grounded. He is someone a woman cannot easily replace, because most men fall apart the moment love slips through their fingers. When you master emotional control, heartbreak stops being a prison and becomes fuel. Every wave of pain becomes a reminder of your own strength. Every silence becomes a space for rebuilding. Every loss becomes a lesson in self-discipline. Emotional control doesn't make you cold, it makes you powerful. And this power becomes the foundation for the next transformation, where you stop trying to win her back and start becoming the man she never believed you'd have the courage to become. 6. Becoming the high-value man. Her choosing someone else is not the end, it's the mirror. It forces you to confront the parts of yourself you ignored, the habits you let slip, and the confidence you allowed to erode. In the shock of losing her, you convinced yourself she took your confidence with her, as if your worth lived in her approval. But a man's worth isn't built in relationships. It's revealed when they break. Anyone can feel strong when everything goes right. It's only when life fractures that you discover what you're truly made of. Most men panic in this moment. They chase, they argue, they beg. They try to reclaim the image of themselves they once saw reflected in her eyes. But all that chasing does is confirm her decision. That desperation becomes the very reason she felt justified leaving. Because no woman respects the man who disappears into the loss instead of rising from it. The truth is simple, even if it's not easy. The only path forward is rebuilding. Rebuild your body so you can trust your strength again. Rebuild your focus so your mind stops drifting to places that weaken you. Rebuild your purpose so your identity is no longer tied to someone who walked away. A broken relationship can either be your graveyard or your rebirth, and the difference lies in whether you choose discipline over despair. When you rise, quietly, steadily, without seeking recognition, you stop caring who she picked. Not out of bitterness, but because you finally see the deeper truth. She never truly chose herself, let alone you. And a woman who isn't grounded in her own identity can never be the one who defines yours. What comes next is the shift she never anticipated. The moment she realizes your absence speaks louder than your presence ever did. 7. She notices, but too late. Your silence moves her more than your words ever did. She expected the familiar version of you to crumble the moment she chose someone else, the man who reacted, who over-explained, who tried to prove his worth. But instead, she finds a void where your emotions used to be, an emptiness she never prepared for. And in that emptiness, something begins to shift. The predictable responses she relied on are gone. The attention she took for granted has vanished. What once fed her certainty now starves it. With time, your absence becomes a question she cannot answer. She checks her phone, expecting your name to appear. She posts something, waiting for the reaction that never comes. She scrolls, hoping to catch you watching. But silence meets her every attempt, and questions left unanswered have a way of growing sharper. Doubt begins as a whisper, but regret grows like a shadow. Slow, creeping, inescapable. And here's the part most men miss. You don't need to do anything. No grand gesture, no strategic response, no attempts to manipulate the outcome. Let her sit with what she created. Let her feel the distance she once assumed she controlled. Because the moment she realizes she no longer influences your world is the moment she starts wondering why. But something even more powerful happens while she spirals in uncertainty. You evolve. You rebuild your life, your focus, your identity. So when she finally reaches out, expecting the old version of you to return, you'll discover a truth that catches even you off guard. You've outgrown the need to respond. And that, more than anything else, is what makes her regret come full circle. The man she remembers no longer exists, and the man you've become no longer waits for her to notice. 8. You've already won. Victory isn't getting her back. It's finally realizing you don't need her anymore. For so long, you believed closure was something she had to give you, some final explanation or apology that would settle the storm inside your chest. But the truth is far simpler and far more powerful. Real closure arrives the moment her presence, or her absence, stops shaping your days. That's when the emotional leash snaps. That's when the weight lifts. She once wanted emotional control, not necessarily out of malice, but because she believed you'd always orbit around her choices. She counted on your reactions. She relied on your longing. She assumed you would stay anchored to the version of yourself that needed her to feel whole. But the moment you stopped chasing, the moment you stopped performing the role she expected, you shattered the dynamic she depended on. You didn't fight her. You didn't correct her. You simply chose yourself. And nothing disrupts a woman more than a man who chooses indifference over longing, peace over chaos, self-respect over validation. Indifference isn't coldness, it's freedom. It's the quiet realization that someone else's decisions no longer determine your direction. It's waking up one morning and noticing the story no longer hurts because you are no longer the man who lived it. You win the moment her choices no longer define you, the moment you stop replaying the past, the moment her new relationship stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling irrelevant. That's when the game ends, because by then you're not trying to prove anything, not to her, not to yourself. You've already won by outgrowing the version of you that believed she was the prize. Now you understand, the real prize was always your own evolution. 9. The Stoic path, a new beginning. She may have chosen someone else, but now you choose yourself, and that single shift marks the beginning of a life you were always meant to build. For months, maybe years, you feared starting over at this age. You told yourself it was too late, that beginning again meant admitting defeat, that losing her meant losing the future you imagined. But the Stoics reminded us long before heartbreak ever existed, nothing external is guaranteed, not love, not security, not even the people we believe will stay. Love comes and goes. People come and go. Validation fades the moment it arrives. And the more tightly you cling to what is slipping away, the more fractured your soul becomes. That's why the pain felt so sharp. Not because she chose someone else, but because you anchored your identity to something that was never truly yours to control. Grief wasn't the enemy, attachment was. But here's the deeper truth. This moment isn't an ending, it's the doorway to becoming the kind of man no one can replace. The Stoic path begins the moment you stop negotiating your self-worth with the outside world. It begins when you build a life anchored in discipline, clarity, and self-respect, when your mornings are defined by purpose, not longing, when your nights are shaped by peace, not resentment. you discover a strength most men never touch because they spend their lives chasing what cannot be held. But you are different now. You're learning to master your mind instead of losing it to emotion. You're learning that solitude isn't emptiness. It's the forge where identity is rebuilt. You're learning that starting over isn't a punishment. It's a privilege reserved for men strong enough to rise after being broken. And here's the part she never expected. She may forget the man you were, the one who feared losing her, the one who carried heartbreak like armor. But she will never forget the man you become on this path. The man shaped by discipline, sharpened by pain, and strengthened by unshakable self-mastery. Because once you choose yourself fully, no one else's choice can ever define you again. This is where your new beginning truly starts, and where her chapter in your story finally ends. Brother, hear me clearly. Everything you just lived through, being left, replaced, overlooked, hurt, was never a verdict on your worth. It was a reminder that you placed too much power in the hands of someone who wasn't built to hold it. The message I want you to carry is simple and sharp. She didn't walk away because you weren't enough. She walked away because you stopped evolving. And this pain only becomes a loss if you stay the same man she decided to outgrow. When you learn emotional detachment, you don't become cold, you become clear. When you stop reacting, you regain your power. When you pull back and disappear from her story, you're not running, you're rebuilding. And the moment you start restoring yourself, your body, your goals, your discipline, your focus, you realize she was never the greatest loss. She was simply the spark that exposed how much more you were capable of becoming. Here's the life lesson that grounds all of this. A strong man doesn't wait to be chosen. He chooses himself first. He doesn't need validation, apologies, or closure. He wins the moment her emotions no longer dictate his direction. He wins when his silence isn't born from anger but from self-respect. He wins when he looks back and sees the old version of himself as too small for the life he's now building. And remember this, brother. She may forget the man who once needed her, but she will never forget the man who rose after losing her. If this message spoke to you, if it reminded you of the standard you were born to uphold, then don't let it end here. Like this video, subscribe to Stoic Station, and stay with the brotherhood that refuses to shrink in the face of loss. Drop your thoughts or your story in the comments, not for validation, but as a declaration that you're ready to continue the journey back to your strength, your discipline, your identity. You're not alone on this path. And the next chapter begins the moment you choose not to look back.